I don't need a scientifically accurate disaster movie.
Yo, I'm gonna try not to get emotional as I talk about this movie.
There is a very heavy suspension of disbelief that needs to happen.
Welcome one, welcome all to ScreenRant's Challenge My Goat. Happy New Year. We are kicking off 2026 by declaring the greatest disaster movie of all time. My name is Liam Crowley, and I'm your shepherd through this journey of superlatives as we crown some of the greatest topics in film, television, entertainment as a whole, history. We are joined today by our expert, ScreenRant editor across multiple teams, Mr. Grant Hermanns. Grant, good to see you. Good to have you on Challenge My Goat. What makes you qualified to declare the greatest disaster movie of all time? And who is your pick?
So I have been watching disaster movies since I was a kid. There's something about, in a weird way, escapism that just always gripped me because you are literally trying to escape the end of the world in some ways. And the adventure that comes from them, but also sort of in some films, the idea of what the end of the world could look like, just always visually exciting and intriguing to see how filmmakers put it together. Obviously, as a kid, I started on the films of Roland Emmerich, as most people do, with the likes of Day After Tomorrow and 2012 and Independence Day and all that. And I have just continued to grow and watched many more ever since. I love especially the double headers that we saw throughout many years, what with Deep Impact versus Volcano and Volcano versus Dante's Peak and Deep Impact versus my ultimate pick for the greatest disaster film of all time, Armageddon, directed by Michael Bay and led by Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, and Liv Tyler.
A great selection with a great Boston boy, Ben Affleck in that picture. One of the earliest films I ever saw him in before his career truly exploded. Grant, you're being challenged today by entertainment writer Liz Declan. Liz, great to have you on the show. What makes you qualified to challenge Grant's GOAT?
So I weirdly took a class in undergrad called Geology, Disasters vs. Hollywood. And the entire goal of the class was to look at movies and compare them against the real geological phenomena to see how accurate they were. So that's my weird angle into this conversation, in addition to writing about movies and TV shows.
Okay, Grant, you might be taking to school on this episode. That is one of the most unique, what makes you qualified we've ever heard. We have someone on the show who's actually taken a class in this very ultra niche specific genre of film. I'm very stoked to hear your pick, Liz. Before we get into that, Grant, I need you to lay the foundation for me. What makes Armageddon the greatest disaster movie of all time? You got 60 seconds.
So Armageddon was one of the first disaster movies I ever saw, and it came about because I fell in love with Bruce Willis's movies as a kid. Ironically, started with The Kid and then went on to the likes of Die Hard and whatnot. And when I found Armageddon, I just knew that there was something big and explosive about it that I wanted to check out. And as I did, the more I watched it over the years, the more I just fell in love with the fact that it was this big visual spectacle. But at the same time, it didn't detract so much from the characters that are at the heart of the movie. And I think that's ultimately why it is the greatest disaster movie of all time, because it doesn't let you forget that you are meant to root for these characters. You're not so focused on such a huge swath of characters across multiple countries and across the state. You're focused on these one group of characters as they're trying to save the world. And there's even something of an underdog nature to their efforts to stop Comet Debbie, that it's just such a treat from start to finish.
He said some things that I like in that opening statement. I'll get to that topic when we get to the debate section itself. Liz, you got 60 seconds to tell me specifically why you disagree.
So I'm not going to argue that Armageddon isn't a classic. Of course it is. I do also think it's very, very long, and it does not keep your attention for the entire 2.5 hours. And I've already kind of shared where I'm at with disaster movies in terms of my unique perspective on them. So you do have to suspend a lot of your disbelief when it comes to Armageddon. But like I said, I'm not going to argue that it's not a classic. And of course, it's star-studded. But I do think in terms of how much belief you have to suspend and just in terms of the length, it's a little much for me.
Liz is confident with 30 seconds to spare in that opening statement. I got to know, what is your challenger pick? Who are you bringing to the stage?
My pick is The Impossible.
Okay, we have an asteroid movie versus a tsunami movie in the greatest disaster film debate. Grant, I want to hear some more about Armageddon specifically. What I said at the beginning that I liked out of it was it makes you root for the characters. This is not just a spectacle movie. There's substance behind it. Tell me about those characters and what makes them so rootable.
So I think one thing that so many disaster movies often find that they're not able to connect with audiences is because they give us these very scientific characters who they're specifically set in the film in order to give us a reasonable out, a reasonable of, oh, they're going to stop it because they know all of this. So instead, giving us these oil driller characters, salt of the earth, roughnecks, as they call themselves in the film, you're watching them go up to save the earth. And yes, as Liz mentioned, there is a very heavy suspension of disbelief that needs to happen in order to believe that these oil drillers are going to save the world. But at the same time, again, it sort of goes to that underdog nature of the story, in my opinion, that I love so much watching across all genres. I mean, sports, action, comedy, whatever it is, there's that underdog, if it's done well, is done or can be so effective. And I think that's what I love about this roster of characters is just that, you know, Bruce Willis, he's just Bruce Wilson and up. He is just, he's scolding at everybody. He's swearing at everybody. He's shooting people at one point. But at the same time, he brings such a tender care to his group that you want to root for him. Ben Affleck is a young Ben Affleck in that he's very energetic. He's very erratic. He's a hothead. But at the same time, he plays that charisma so well that you also, again, want to root for him. Liv Tyler's Grace, the fact that she feels so it's a rare powerful female character, in my opinion, in a Michael Bay movie, especially Grace, that by the time we get to the halfway film and her and Affleck are engaged, you're not just rooting for that, you're rooting to see what her future would look like once she gets off that drill and out from under her dad's sort of management. And then as we meet the rest of that family, I mean, the Roughnecks are such a wild bunch that you can't help but fall in love a little bit with that dysfunctional family. But at the same time, I will agree again with Liz in that in typical Michael Bay fashion, the cast does get big enough that then the runtime runs on a little too long at parts. But at the same time, for me, there's just something still so engaging and exciting about his direction, so fast paced that it doesn't lose my attention at the very least. Like, I'm really glued to the screen to see every step of the way of their training and then of them flying up to space and everything that goes wrong in between. And it's just an absolute blast. And then I'll round this up too in that, you know, Michael Bay's direction is, I mean, he has such a unique style of direction. Say what you will about the overall qualities of his film's content, the direction is always one of the most visually impressive things you'll see in one of his films. And I feel like Armageddon, he knew how to really amplify the scale of any scene. It could be even something as simple as just a conversation between two characters in a room, and his direction just amplified it in a way that really made the stakes and the scale feel so much bigger than, you know, any big budget effects needed for the film.
We've learned a lot about Armageddon through that monologue. Thank you so much, Grant. Liz, I want to hear more about The Impossible. We've kind of set the stage. It's your selection. Talk to me about the cast. Talk to me about the spectacle of it all. Talk to me about the story, which I realize is based on true events. This is a rare disaster movie that is fully pulled from real life experience.
Yes, absolutely. So listen, I hear you on Liv Tyler. I'm a Lord of the Rings girl. I absolutely love Liv Tyler. However, I'm sure it won't be a surprise. I'm really a Star Wars girl. And Ewan McGregor is the dad. He plays Henry, the father in this family, the main family. Tom Holland, I'm also an MCU person, is the son. He's so little in this movie, but he's still so good. And then Naomi Watts is the mom. And they're all, I mean, it's brilliantly acted. So in terms of the cast, they're fantastic. I love a true story, and I agree completely. It's a rarity in this genre, and they did a really beautiful job with it. So they actually went back to the real location in Thailand where the event happened. And not only did the real mom, Maria, come with them, but she also was able to go to the hospital that saved her life and thank everybody. I'm going to try not to get emotional as I talk about this movie, but I rewatched it for the millionth time in preparation, and I cried multiple times again. It's so emotionally raw. It does not pull its punches. They show a baby strapped into a car seat in a car as the car goes toward the wave. So it really, as heartbreaking as that is, and it kills me, I love a movie that doesn't pull its punches. So in terms of the story itself, can I do spoilers? Is that permissible?
It's a 2012 release at this point, right?
Okay.
It's been 14 years.
Okay, great. So what's really incredible about this story is that this is a real family, a family of five. It's mom, dad, and three sons. They experienced this horrific, record-breaking tsunami. It was a 9.1 earthquake and then a 100-foot wall tsunami, and it killed 230,000 people, estimated. They found each other. They survived and they all found each other. And the boys were little. So it's just this very incredible story. The real family was very involved, even the little kids. I mean, they were older when they got to look at the script, but they looked at the script as it was being made. The mom was very, very involved on set. Like I said, Naomi Watts reached out to her multiple times for guidance. So I just think it's a really beautiful version of a disaster movie, but it still has all the things you want in a disaster movie. Wave is terrifying. It is very touch and go for so many people. It doesn't pull its punches in other ways too. There's dead and dying people. It's really harrowing. So that I feel like I recouped my 30 seconds there, but that's my spiel on the impossible.
Well, Liz, I want to ask you a follow-up question on that. You said you've seen this movie like a million times. What was that first experience? This is my nostalgia temp check to you. What was your first experience watching The Impossible? Was it in theaters?
It was not in theaters. I actually discovered this very late, so I don't want to age myself too much, but this was actually not one of the movies that I watched in that geology class that I took in undergrad. I watched it just a couple years ago. I'm a very hyperfixation-oriented person, and I got hyperfixated on disaster movies again. I actually wanted to be a volcanologist, but I don't have the math and science capacity for that. So I revisited this obsession that I had, and I watched every disaster movie I could get my hands on. And I hadn't seen this one, and I didn't actually know about it. And I was surprised I didn't know a Ewan McGregor movie. I watched it, and then I immediately started it over again. So the very first time I watched it, I hit replay right away. And from there, I don't know how many times I've watched it, to be honest with you. So nostalgia, only a couple of years.
Fair enough. It's an odd comfort movie, but there is something about the triumphant, perseverance of the human spirit. There's been a lot of great titles I've seen lately that capture that, not necessarily in the disaster genre, but in that based on true events genre. Grant, for you, your nostalgia temp check. When was the first time you watched Armageddon?
So I saw Armageddon. I did not see it in theaters. I was not alive. Well, actually, I was alive. I was 2 years old. So that probably would have scared me even more than if I had actually understood what was happening on screen, given how loud that movie is. But I first saw it by renting it from Blockbuster back in the day when RIP Blockbuster. But again, having loved Bruce Willis as a kid, I remember seeing it. I remember too knowing that it was from or like within the same wheelhouse as The Rock and as National Treasure and all of these movies. Jerry Bruckheimer, and was like, okay, I need to see this. I got to see what this is about. And I fell in love with it, even, which is surprising because I can't remember how old I was. I don't think I was in double digits yet though. And so to have fallen in love with it as much as I did, especially given how long a movie as it is, as Liz pointed out, is surprising. Kids don't normally have that good of an attention span, but I was hooked. And then I do remember it as well being one of the first movies that once I really started to have that sort of grasp on emotions regarding films, I did cry at the end with Bruce Willis sacrificing himself because it's just so emotional. And again, Liv Tyler's performance in her scene saying goodbye is so great. And, and then to hear I Don't Want to Miss a Thing every time after that is just always oh man, do I want to just start crying right now? Because this song is so good and it's just so powerful.
I'm getting emotional. You talking about your Blockbuster experience. We didn't have one in my hometown, but we had red boxes everywhere. And that was the vibe. You get a movie from Redbox or Blockbuster, you get all your snacks, and it felt like a home theater. No matter how big or small your screen was, you're creating that theater atmosphere at home. You're creating that event atmosphere. Grant, I'm throwing it right back to you, though. I need to hear you pick apart The Impossible a little bit. You've given some great points on defending Armageddon. What are your issues, if any, with The Impossible?
So I will say this, it's actually been a long while since I've seen The Impossible, but at the same time, I saw it within a couple of years after it came out because, I did not know about Tom Holland yet. So this was pre-MCU, but I knew Ewan McGregor, I knew Naomi Watts, and I knew that it was a true story, and I knew that it was up for all these awards. So I was like, all right, let me give this a go. And I mean, it's a great film. Like, I don't want to pick it apart too much. I think for me, one thing of why it wouldn't go in my GOAT list is because it is based on a true story. It then has to really make sure it's paying respect to the people who do die and the people who lived. And that's not a bad thing at all. That's a great thing for a based on a true story film to do. I just worry, or I always, in that case, then with a disaster movie, I'm like, okay, but that takes away from the, I don't want to call it trashy, but maybe just the more entertainment value to come of the disaster genre. So I think that's ultimately where I would not put it in my GOAT list, but it is such a powerful perseverance of the soul, such a powerful tale of family survival that, I mean, it is harrowing. I mean, that tsunami scene is horrifying to watch. I still remember like just hand over my mouth the first time I saw it because it was that tense. But I'd say that's ultimately, where it holds it back for me is just that it's a little more of a drama than it is the disaster movie, which is where I land.
I hear what you're saying, though, because disaster movies are fun. Like, one of my most fun at theater experiences, I forget what year the movie came out, but Moonfall? Remember Moonfall? Like, I just turned off my brain. I ate my popcorn and I had a great time. The Impossible, I don't want to say I didn't have a great time watching the film, but it is like Grant gave a great word. It's harrowing because it's based on true events. Even though there is a triumph in the end, it comes at that cost of all that loss. So Liz, do you feel like having fun with a disaster movie is an integral part of a disaster film? And obviously, since your selection is The Impossible, can't wait too much. Why is removing the fun from your selection not a crucial point?
Yeah, so it's so funny. It's actually in my notes that I wanted to say, I think what this is ultimately going to come down to is what do you want out of a disaster movie? And so I think there are a lot of people who are willing to suspend disbelief. I mean, 2012 is the wildest movie I've ever seen in my life, but I enjoy watching that movie. I wouldn't say it's the greatest, obviously, but I enjoy that movie for all the reasons that people like when disaster movies are just, chaos and wild plot lines and vivacious characters and all these things that we love to see. I think for me, and I do want to address, Grant, if that's okay, the idea that you have to pay respect to the real people. And what I love about this movie is that the extras in the movie are actually people who lost family members in the event. So I just love how they went about this. And like I said, they went back to the hospital. So I think they tried to be as mindful as they could be. In terms of the fun, I like a tragedy. I don't know. So maybe I'm off base there.
You can have fun in any genre of film. So if that's what is your cup of tea, then, by all means. Grant, coming back to you to talk a little bit more about Armageddon, I want to know, in your perspective, does it still hold up today? Because after rewatching it in preparation for this debate, some of the visual effects, I don't want to say aren't fully there because it's so stylized to that time period. But one of my favorite asteroid movies, which is very unpopular, Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up did a really good job with painting the asteroid and the whole disaster coming through. So could you talk to me about whether or not you believe Armageddon still holds up, either visually, storytelling-wise, whatever direction you want to take it?
Sure. I mean, yeah. So I actually just rewatched the film this morning in preparation. I had meant to do it yesterday and schedules didn't align. But watching it this morning, I mean, I was still in awe of how much it held up. Now, I will say, knowing a lot about this film nowadays, some of the critiques did start to come in my head that maybe I didn't agree with back in the day. The suspension of disbelief in particular with regards to its more science nature of it. But visually, I actually think it holds up quite well. I mean, I look at the opening scene in in New York, the opening destruction of the meteor shower. And I was like shocked how horrifying it was, how real it felt. I mean, it looked like a perfect mix of miniatures with CGI. And I mean, yes, some of the CGI looks a little dated, but it doesn't look so bad to the point. Like, I think about Deep Impact, for instance. You know, we talk about competing movies. Deep Impact has that huge tsunami at the end of the film that comes and takes out a lot of cities, and it doesn't quite hold up the way it could have. It's so, I mean, because water physics are just such a hard thing to do in VFX. But with Armageddon, I feel like at least visually it does really hold up. Storytelling wise, yes, again, I can see a little more so now than when I was younger why people might feel this movie's overstuffed. There are definitely a lot of characters and there are a lot of concurring story arcs. But at the same time, I feel that when the moment is right, it really does make sure to hone in on who we want to care about and who we want to root for. And so in that sense, I do think it holds up. I mean, it's but again, it also does come down to so many different factors. It comes down to what you want out of a disaster movie. It comes down to that suspension of disbelief. I mean, me personally, I don't need a scientifically accurate disaster movie. It's one in which, if it happens, it's probably going to be a little more boring than most disaster movies end up being. And that's not a bad thing for scientific accuracy. But for me, the scientific accuracy is not a priority when I go into these. And so I'm willing to forgive it for some of its foolishness.
I'm glad you brought up the New York element, because in my head, when I'm replaying the CGI that I believe is dated, it's all space-based. But that opening scene, especially when the Chrysler building hits down on like in the 50s streets, that blew my mind when we were watching it, because now I have a different perspective on New York. The first time I watched Armageddon was before I was living here. And now it's like, oh my God. And Paris in that film too. Insane stuff. Guys, we're getting to the end of our debate section here, but Liz, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to wrap up your argument. What makes The Impossible the greatest disaster movie of all time? You can take this in any direction you'd like.
Sure. I mean, I think I'll just harp on what I've been harping on, which is I totally hear where you're coming from. If you're just looking for a disaster movie that is, you're going to have fun when you watch it, The Impossible is probably not that movie, right? But I think in terms of its respect for the story, in terms of the fact that it is a true story, that it incorporated this family, and I think, it is accurate. It's a very accurate depiction of what this earthquake and this tsunami looked like. They used the real location. But I also think it's engaging. It's not boring to me, even though it is based on a true story, because you do have these moments of intense chaos. You have very damaged bodies and all of these different things that you associate with a disaster movie. And we've talked already about, the wave is genuinely terrifying, and they show all of these different, the wave comes back at one point. So for me, the tension is there, the anticipation is there, the fear is there. And so even though it's definitely more of like a heartstrings and, it is a true story, I also think it's very exciting.
Oh, I was just about to give you your 5-second countdown, but some seconds saved. Grant, you got 60 seconds to wrap us up here. What makes Armageddon the greatest of all time?
So again, I'm going to also sort of come back to what I've been saying, which is that it's a movie that understands it's more about the characters than it is about the spectacle. But when it is about the spectacle, it is about the spectacle. It is big. It is bombacious. It is hyper stylized. It is all these great things. And then the last thing too I'll say about it is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. I feel like one thing with a lot of Roland Emmerich movies, because he is dubbed the king of disaster movies, is they're all so serious. And I like that Armageddon lets its concept have fun with it. It has its dramatic moments, but not to the point of taking away from the fact these are still a bunch of roughnecks flying up to space to drop a nuke in the middle of an asteroid. I mean, that's a little kooky, and Michael Bay lets it be kooky when it needs to be.
Well, if Don't Look Up taught us anything, oil drillers might be better than scientists to get the job done. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on Challenge My Go. Two very well-argued arguments. If you're reading Grant's article right now, which has even more analysis, head on down to the comments section and let us know your selections, whether or not you agree with Liz or Grant, or if you have your own pick. A lot of great disaster movies left on the table in this debate. I would kind of sway Day After Tomorrow. We're talking about iconic scenes when the waves are coming up over the Statue of Liberty. One of the most iconic shots in film, not just disaster movies. 2012 is a great selection that got some love earlier. And if you really want to go artsy fartsy, you could go the disaster artist. It's in the title, right? No, it doesn't really count. Guys, thank you again so much. Like I said, if you have good comments, we'll read them on the show next week because we took a week off. We don't have any comments to read this time around. So I will give you guys the time now to plug your work, what you got going on in the entertainment realm. Grant, we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. I am an editor on our both news and interviews and events team. So I am always making sure that we are up to date with all new projects. We've got a lot of great interviews on the horizon that we are getting content out for. And I'm also a reviewer, and we've got Sundance on the horizon. So we've got a lot of exciting reviews coming out for that one towards the end of the month.
January is a big month. We're off to the races indeed. Liz, thank you again for joining us on Challenge My Goat. Where can the people find you, and what do you got going on in the entertainment world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I write for a few different publications. I'll shout out ScreenRant, of course. I also write for Parade Magazine, and then I write video scripts for the YouTube channel Screen Crush, which is a lot of fun. And if we're cool to shout out social media, I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. I love TikTok at Vava Vera. It's VA Vera, both.
Amazing. Grant, I want to give you the chance to shout out your handle because you got the most creative handle in the business. Tell them what it is.
I was going to say, I'll actually ping pong off that and say I am on all of it. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. I am Grand Theft Auto. That is GrantHeftHo. Good little mix of my name with one of my favorite franchises.
It's so clever. I wish I had a name that could work out its way into that. I'm just my boring name at Liam T. Crowley on all socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. As for what's going on ScreenRant, a lot of interviews, a lot of event coverage. Star Trek, Starfleet Academy is coming out this month, and we just wrapped up the junket, the carpet, so a lot of great content coming from there. And we're also heading to Fan Expo New Orleans this month to do some panels with people from Lord of the Rings, people from Star Trek, people from Twister. Twister counts as a disaster movie, I would say. That's another one that could have been in today's show. Maybe we'll talk about that on the panel with Helen Hunt. I think that'd be fun. We'll get a little plug for Challenge My Goat in there. Guys, thank you again, once again, for joining us. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to our producer, John, for running a steamy, clean ship behind the scenes. We'll catch you next week.